This is Algebra 2, Lesson 5.5, Part 2. This is completing the square. We're picking up on the second example. Here's a problem for the back of your page, everybody. 5x squared minus 10x plus 30. Solve this by completing the square. First thing you need to do to make it look like the other problems we're looking at is you need to take out whatever each one of the terms have in common. They all have the number 5 in common. Or you can divide the whole thing by 5. Divide the whole thing by 5, which is, this is similar to that bell work problem we had that I said was kind of tough because you had to move the other thing over. So if you divide this by 5, it cancels it out. If you divide this by 5, you get negative 2. And if you divide this by 5, you get plus 6. So all that cancels out, and 0 divided by anything is 0. So now you got something that says x squared minus 2x plus 6 is equal to 0. So from there, take about a minute and see if you can complete the square. First off, that 6 is not a good C value, so move it over. See if you can handle that one. So you need to move that positive 6 over. It's plus 6, so you subtract 6. Another way you can do it is you can say, well, it's positive on the left. That means when I move it over to the right, it becomes negative. That's how a lot of people think of it. You need to find a new C value. Remember what C equals. C is half of B, or B divided by 2 squared. B's value is negative 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and negative 1 squared is positive 1. So that's your new C value, positive 1. Remember, though, if you add 1 to the left side of an equation, you must add it to the right side. You must balance it out. So plus 1. Now it's back balanced. So negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. The other side is a perfect trinomial. Take the square root of the first term, x. Take the square root of the third term, or the C term, 1. This is the sign that goes in between, a minus. So x minus 1 squared is equal to negative 5. So now let's solve for x by undoing the fact that it says x squared. We'll undo that by taking a square root. If you do it to the left, do it to the right. It cancels that out and simply leaves you with x minus 1 equals the square root of negative 5. Remember, the square root of a negative value, you multiply it by I to make it both positive and negative, square root of 5. The last thing you have to do with this one is undo minus 1 by adding it. You add it to the left, add it to the right. Remember, these are not like terms on the right, so you can't add them together. You can simply write them next to each other. X is equal to positive 1 plus or minus the square root of 5 times I. And again, A plus BI. Number 2 on your checkpoint says to solve this one. X squared plus 4x plus 1 is equal to 0. Solve this by completing the square. First thing you want to do is move plus 1 to the other side. When you do that, you're going to get x squared plus 4x we're going to need a new value for c, is equal to, we moved it over from the left to the right, it becomes negative 1. So when we look for our new value for c, we're going to take our b value 4, divide it by 2 and get 2, and square that and get positive 4. So our new value for c is positive 4. Remember, if you add something to one side of the equation, you must add it to the other side. So plus 4 there as well. So negative 1 plus 4 is positive 3 on the right. The left side is a perfect trinomial. Take the square root of the first term, x, the square root of the last term, 4. This is the sign that goes between them. X plus 4 squared is equal to 3. Solve for x by getting rid of x, this whole thing squared, and taking the square root. You do it to the left, do it to the right. This cancels this and leaves you with x plus 4 equals the square root of 3. And again, that's both positive and negative value. Undo plus 4 for the last step by subtracting it. You subtract it there, subtract it here. Remember, those are not like terms. So x is equal to negative 4, that goes first, plus or minus the square root of 3. Okay, just caught a mistake, everybody. All the way back at this step right here, it's the square root of 4. It's not 4. I wrote plus 4. It's actually plus 2. It's not going to change anything about our problem, really, except the very last part. It should say x plus 2. Remember, it's the square root of 4, which is 2. So right now, you still undo the square root. You still undo square by taking the square root, but now it says x plus 2. And then you subtract 2 from it, and subtract 2 here. So it's negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. Not 4, negative 2. Okay, vertex form is almost the same thing, except the difference in vertex form, you could see it's not just one variable. All these over here, when we were completing the squares, you had x squared and you had x to the first power, but all you were dealing with was x. Okay, when you're talking about vertex form, it gives you an equation. It gives you a quadratic equation. Y is equal to x squared plus 6x plus 7. Okay. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to do the same thing as completing the square. You got to find a new c value. So right here, just like on completing the square, this is not a good c value. It's got to move to the other side. So we move it over the same way by subtracting 7 on both sides. So y minus 7. Okay, it just skips a whole lot of steps right here. Let's look at this one off to the side real quick. It's easier the way I'm going to show you. Y is equal to x squared plus 6x plus 7, because they leave the plus 7 on the right. They don't move it over, because you got to move it back anyways. But I think it's easier to move it over. So again, what I said a minute ago, let's move plus 7 over by subtracting 7 on both sides. So what that gives you is y minus 7 equals x squared plus 6x plus a new c. So we want to find our new value of c. Our new value of c is, remember what c is. C is b divided by 2 squared. B's value is 6 in this case right here. Divided by 2 is 3. And 3 squared is positive 9. Remember, if you add 9 to the right, though, you got to add 9 to the left. And you can see that's what they have on this step right here. Complete the square, they got plus 9 in there for you. But just instead of moving 7 to the other side like we were doing with the other problems, they just slide it out, which is, I think, is a little more confusing. So let's do it this way instead. So y minus 7 plus 9 is going to be y plus 2 right there. Is equal to, this is a perfect trinomial. So take the square root of the first term, x, the square root of the third term, 3. This is the sign that goes between them, plus. So x plus 3 squared. And then the last thing you got to do to make it vertex form is get rid of that plus 2 right there. Subtract 2. You subtract it there, subtract it here. So you're going to get something that looks like this. Y is equal to x plus 3 squared minus 2. Remember, you can't take 2 away from plus 3 because it's inside parentheses. And this is vertex form. So let's go back through the steps they're using it. Write it as a binomial squared. So that's the same thing we have here. X plus 3 squared. Again, they still have that plus 7 hanging out on the right. I don't like that plus 7. I think that's more confusing. And then solve for y. Notice that's what we have. X plus 3 squared minus 2. So you can see what your vertex is at that point. Remember what your vertex is. This is the opposite of your x value. So you see how that one says positive 3? It says positive 3. The x value is negative 3 then. And this one is exactly what your y value is. See how it says negative 2? So it's negative 2. So your vertex is negative 3, negative 2. And that's vertex form, negative 3, negative 2. Let's do another one like that. On the back. Let's write this quadratic equation or quadratic function in vertex form. Let's do it in steps. First thing, get rid of this by moving it to the other side. Take 10 seconds. So now what it's going to say is y minus 16 equals x squared plus 6x plus c. Find c. Take 15 seconds to find c. Remember what c is. C is b divided by 2 squared. B's value is 6. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is positive 9. Remember, however, though, if you add 9 to the right, you got to add 9 to the left. So now what we got is y negative 16 plus 9. When you put those two together is negative 7 equals, we have a perfect trinomial here. Factor out this perfect trinomial as the square of a binomial. Take 20 seconds. Remember to factor this one out. It's the square root of the first term, x. The square root of the last term, 3. The sign in front of b, plus. So x plus 3 squared. Almost finished. Almost have vertex form. Get y equals all by itself in order to create vertex form. Take 10 seconds. Again, it says y minus 7, so undo minus 7 by adding it. You add it to the left, add it to the right. Remember, we cannot add it to 3 because that's in parentheses. So we have something that simply says y is equal to x plus 3 squared plus 7. This is vertex form. Y equals x plus 3 squared plus 7. Now let's take that knowledge. What is the vertex of the graph? Remember what your vertex is. This is your x term. In fact, it's the opposite of that. And this one is your y term. It's exactly what that one says. So your vertex then of this graph is negative 3, positive 7. So here's another question. Is this vertex the bottom of this graph or the top of it? Got to think about that one for a second. Is it the minimum or the maximum? Which way is the graph opening, up or down? This is vertex form. What is the A value here? I know it's been a couple of weeks, but it hasn't been that long. What's the A value? What's multiplying by the parentheses? 1, is that positive or negative? Which way is it opening? So is this the bottom or the top? It's opening up. The vertex is here. Bottom. That is the minimum amount, -3, 7. All right, let's do this one in vertex form. Take a minute to do this one. You got to move that -4 over first. When you bring -4 over, it becomes +4 on the left. So y plus 4 equals x squared minus 2x plus c. Got to need to get a new c value. B value is -2. Divided by 2 is -1. Squared is +1. Remember, when you add 1 to one side, you got to add it to the other side. So now we got y plus 5 equals that perfect trinomial there. Take the square root of the first term, x. The square root of the third term, 1. The sign in front of b, minus squared, almost vertex form. Get rid of 5 plus 5 by subtracting it. -5 here. Y is equal to x minus 1 squared minus 5. Vertex form. What is your vertex of this equation? What's the x value? +1. Good job. What is the y value? -5. Good. Bottom of the graph or top of the graph? Bottom. Very good, because it is positive. And again, you could look back to this form of the equation, the original form, and you could see the a value here is also +1. So you know that that thing opens up. So 1, -5.